Beloved disciples of the Lord Jesus Christ, today we complete our study of the 9th chapter of the Gospel of St. John. It is a remarkable chapter, and it is helpful if we will read the entire chapter from the beginning again. In chapter 9, verse 5, Jesus said, "As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." Having said this, he opened the eyes of a man blind from birth. But in the verses following, it becomes clear that Jesus is not only able to heal physical blindness, but also spiritual blindness. For step by step, the man cured of his physical darkness is also led by Jesus to spiritual sight and light. In every way, Jesus is the light of the world. The spiritual leaders of the nation, however, in their rejection of Jesus and in their increasing opposition to the light, became increasingly darkened in their inner life. They angrily denounced the healed man for defending his belief that Jesus was a man from God. They excommunicated him from the Old Testament church. In John 9:35-36 we read, Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" When Jesus learned that the man he had healed had been thrown out of the synagogue for his unwavering confession, Jesus took the initiative and went in search of the man and found him. As John Chrysostom, the 4th century bishop of Constantinople, put it, the Jews cast him out of the temple, the Lord of the temple found him. If a man or woman is faithful to what they know of Jesus, even if it is very limited, Jesus nonetheless honors this. And if our Christian witness separates us from others, it brings us nearer to Jesus. Excuse me. Jesus is always true to those who openly confess their faith in him. Jesus asked the man who was blind, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" The formerly blind man was now ready to obey the man who healed him. He had not seen Jesus since the day that he was healed by him. Now he is willing to trust whoever Jesus tells him to trust. Jesus doesn't allow the man's open heart to settle on anyone else. Instead, he reveals himself to the man, and Jesus asked him, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" Jesus' words, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" do not mean, "Do you believe in the existence of the Son of Man?" But instead, they mean, "Do you accept and put your trust in the Son of Man?" Just as in John 3, verse 14 and 16. All through John's Gospel, to believe in Jesus means, do you accept him for what he is and put your trust in him? Also, the terminology, the Son of Man, is Jesus' favorite self-designation for himself. It is used 81 times in the Gospels, and only once is it used by someone other than Jesus. In Acts 7, verse 56, the dying Stephen called out, "Behold, I see the heavens opened, and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God." It was not an accepted name for the Messiah in Jesus' day. Hence, when Jesus used this designation, people would not think that he was claiming to be the Messiah. But later, Christians realized that in the vision of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 13-14, Daniel speaks of, quote, "one like a son of man, who came with the clouds of heaven and was brought into the presence of the Ancient of Days, and was given dominion and glory and kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him." So when Jesus asked the healed blind man, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" Jesus answered, or the blind man answered, "And who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and it is he who speaks to you." He said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshipped him. By saying, "You have seen him," Jesus was referring to the miracle the man had experienced. That was the day when he first saw the Son of Man and experienced his power to heal him of his affliction. Then Jesus said, "And it is he who speaks to you." That's all the man needed to know. He immediately replied, "Lord, I believe," and he bowed down before Jesus and worshipped him. There are several occasions recorded in the Gospels when individuals worshiped Jesus after they had experienced miracles from him that only God could perform. And Jesus never rebuked them for worshiping him, for he knew that the Father had revealed his full identity and glory to them. So Jesus didn't rebuke people when they worshiped him. And then chapter 9, verse 39, Jesus said, "For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may become blind." These are very unusual words of Jesus. The words, "For judgment I came into this world," seem at first glance to be a contradiction of what Jesus said earlier in this gospel. Chapter 3:17, "For God sent the Son into the world not to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him." But Jesus here is not saying that he came to execute judgment, rather that his presence and activity in the world themselves constitute a form of judgment. They compel men and women to declare themselves either for or against him. Those who reject and oppose Jesus are judged already, as John 3:18 says, not because he passed judgment on them, but because they have passed it on themselves. Recall the prophetic words of Simeon, who spoke to Mary regarding her child Jesus. In Luke 2:34 and 35, he said, "Behold, this child is set for the fall and rising of many in Israel, and for a sign that is spoken against, that thoughts out of many hearts may be revealed. The sun shines and gives light and warmth to all it touches. But if the sunlight is blocked, then shade results. Shade is a powerless non-reality. It is simply the absence of light. When men reject the light of the world, they live in a darkness of their own making." The blind man now sees, but not only sunlight, but he also sees with his inner eyes God's Son. The Pharisees, on the other hand, who claim to know the Scriptures and to whom it appears as sinful arrogance that this blind man dared to lecture them, they know that God has spoken with Moses, and with great zeal they are his disciples. But they have become blind and see nothing of that which happens before their eyes. The result of Jesus' work is that some who were blind are now released from their blindness and placed into the light, while some who were confident that they saw with perfect vision now reject Jesus and remain locked in a deep inner darkness. I will allow translation. John chapter 9. Some of the Pharisees near Jesus, heard this. That is, when Jesus said, "I came into the world that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may become blind." They therefore said to him, "Are we also blind?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say, 'We see,' your guilt remains." The Pharisees objected to the implication that they were blind, since they believed that they above all others saw clearly. In answer to this, Jesus says, if they were truly blind and so ignorant of the truth, they would not have sin. That is, they would not be guilty of the sin of unbelief. But their insistence that they see made their position serious. For they certainly saw Jesus and his miracles, and they heard his teachings, yet because they thought they already had the light, they refused to acknowledge that his works and word were from God. Their not seeing is a guilty not wanting to see, and that is sin. They continue in their unbelief, so their sin remains. They remain in their guilt of rejection of the light, and thus condemn themselves to their self-chosen darkness. The 9th chapter of John's Gospel gives us a beautiful account of a man who came all the way from physical and spiritual blindness to full physical eyesight and full spiritual light also. Notice his progress toward true faith in Jesus. This is a summary of that in the chapter. Number 1, in verse 11, the man called Jesus a man. He said the man called Jesus was the person who cured him of his blindness. And he knew it was a very unusual and very gifted man that had cured him. Number 2, in verse 17, when they asked him what the Pharisees asked him what he thought of Jesus, he said he's a prophet. His answer was because he had made an advance in his thinking. Being a Jewish man, he no doubt knew that it was mainly prophets, God's spokesmen, who were able to do miracles, and Jesus had performed a great miracle, so he must be a prophet. Number 3, in verse 27, he considers himself a disciple of Jesus. The word disciple means a pupil or a learner. When the leaders kept questioning the man, he sarcastically demanded, "Do you too want to become his disciples?" The word "too" or "also"